spent the next 6 years investing everything we had into this church, our lives, our time, our money. By the way, I started tithing. Um, you know, just every aspect of this church was incredibly meaningful to us. We,
Hmm.
for the first time, I don't know, young 30s, I guess, for the first time, even my wife, we just really discovered at that moment what a relationship with Christ was like. We just didn't know. We had no
Hmm.
idea. And
Yeah.
so it was, it was truly a magical season for us.
Hmm. That you just love the quote you just said. So we didn't really know what it meant to be, you know, living fully engaged or whatever with Jesus. The language that we use here in the Fully Alive community is character and calling. You know, we want to
Mm.
be growing in character and calling, and as we do that, we're increasing our capacity for intimacy in our most, you know, in our relationships with those in our family and our community and workplace, etc., and influence, like bringing Jesus influence to the world. Um, how fully alive were you at that time in
Mm.
that process, both in being changed from the inside character and then using your gifts, calling? How engaged were you on both of those kind of tracks of formation at that particular camp or that church?
I'm never I'm rarely a 10 out of 10 guy. But I would have to say 8 or 9 on a 10 scale on both. I mean, we just, like I said, we invested everything we had into the church, and it was a absolute pleasure to do so. I mean,
Hmm.
we didn't question things. We wanted to spend our time there. Anything there was something that we could help with, we
Hmm.
volunteered.
Hmm.
I willingly, excitedly wrote checks to the church. I mean, it was just,
Which everybody should do. Everybody tithe your local
yep.
congregations. One of the best practices that you can do.
Yeah, we
Generosity
were just
is
all in,
key.
Brian, and
Love it.
you know, we had babies at the time. We waited a long time to have kids. We had babies, and we just, I mean, we took them those years. We took them everywhere, did everything. It was a very special time for us. And again, I remember a preacher talking about being in the flow,
Mm.
and we were absolutely in the center of the river, and
Mm.
just giddy all the way, giddy all the way down
Yeah.
the river.
Yeah, there's something to say about that, like a principle to extract out of it. It's kind of when you're engaged in the offense, there's less need to play defense. You
Huh.
know, when you're engaged in the offense, there's less need to play defense. I mean, if you're pursuing the things of God and you're doing it in community with other people in pursuit of Jesus and His glory and His fame, like you're driving, you're on offense, and there's little time for your mind to be distracted by the things that don't need to distract us. And so it's interesting that you say, like, when I'm in my flow, I saw both intimacy and influence going up because I was developing character and calling. I want to dig just a little deeper into the calling because it's really important to understand for folks that are on this call how big of a deal it was to go through the part that we're going to be getting to here real soon. But you were involved as far as calling. You're a great recruiter. You're a great leader. You have you got all kinds of gifts. What were the top gifts that you were using? And I think it was in men's ministry that you were most highly involved, or was it music ministry, or both, or what?
Yeah, both. Deb and I sang every weekend on stage. It was as it's a big time commitment, and I don't remember a single minute of regret. We absolutely loved being there. At that season, this was chapter one with this church. In that season, I was helping some with ministries in the men's ministry and a financial ministry. I served the church's board.
Mm.
So in this unique way of fundraising, I helped with a couple smaller campaigns, and but it just was
Gotcha.
all. It didn't matter. I'm not kidding. It really didn't matter what was asked of me or what the task was at the time. And the same thing goes for my bride. I mean, we just said, sure, whatever you
All
need,
in.
all
All
in.
in. Got it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the details. You had left and then came back for staff. When
Yeah.
did things start to take a direction from being in the flow to whatever was not in the flow?
All right. So in 2004, we'd been with the church for 6 years. In 2004, we made the outrageously difficult decision
Hmm.
to leave what we had and to go back east because we had the babies. We had the two kids, and
Hmm.
all of our family was back east.
Yeah, it makes
So we
sense.
just knew we
Yeah.
needed to do that. The going away party the church threw for us will always be, in the top five of my memories.
Hmm.
Just the love and anyway, it was very special. We moved back east, and the cool thing is that we stayed in the flow
Hmm.
when we moved back east. We got very fortunate, very lucky, or maybe it was providential, But
Always. Always
yeah,
providential.
we found an amazing church, and I think we went with the right spirit. Just let us know where you want us to serve, and they immediately put us on stage, which was, of course, our
Hmm.
most fun and most fulfilling piece. And so we got to be on worship, and we did it every week again. So
Hmm.
we stayed in the flow, but as you may know, 2008 came and absolutely kicked our tail financially, and we were in touch. I mean, maybe weekly with our church home and friends, and when the financial pain was at a threshold that didn't seem like we wanted to do it much more, the church invited us back to come on staff, and so
Hmm.
that's that transition. And so
Gotcha.
at that point, there was a definitive role of fundraising, as well as co-leading several of the ministries, including the men's ministry you spoke of, and financial
Gotcha.
ministry, and some of these things.
So it's interesting. We talk so often here in the podcast and the Fully Alive community and Disciples Made, the ministry that hosts the Fully Alive, community, about your experiences, like the story God's been writing, using your gifts, your passions, your abilities, and all this other stuff to make the biggest impact in the world you can with Jesus. And it's interesting. You're using all of your gifts. You're using your profession actually is now being given the opportunity to give it all for a local congregation. So this
Mm.
must have been like super high on your anticipation list of how
Oh my
things
gosh.
would go. Like you finally get the opportunity to marry your passion with
Mm-hmm.
your ability to support your family. Like that's to me one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest gifts in the world anyone could possibly ever have. And if you get that opportunity, so I can only imagine how amazing the anticipation level was there. But it ended up being a very different experience than you'd hoped. So what happened? How did that anticipation, what reality came up to meet that anticipation? And just tell us the story in vague terms as you can.
Well, you may need to help me with a name here, but just to just to emphasize the crash that happened when you were just talking. I'm always asking who this guy's name is because I love this quote, but I think, is it Frederick Buechner? Does that sound right to you?
I know
Anyway,
that name, but
yeah, there's a quote, and I'll butcher it, but it's something like, when your work meets the world's great need,
Mm,
it's a
yes.
it's an amazing thing, and that's truly where I was. I mean, I thought I had
Mm,
just hit the jackpot. To answer your question, I think really, to be on the high end, to keep it high level, and just to directly answer your question, I think the job description did not line up with the expectations, and
okay.
whether the the fault was on this side of the fence or the other side of the fence, or maybe a little both. God knows, but I would say our expectations did not align, and it was clear within days. There was a
Within
lot of
days.
yeah, oh yeah, within days, and there was a level of importance that I knew was there. This church needed us to be successful
In
and
fundraising, just to
in
remind
fundraising.
everybody what that role was. So there's real pressure here then.
There's pressure, there's intensity, and there again. I think with all those things, and this is the human side of me, but again, with that idea that I was going to be serving this greater purpose, all these things aligning at once, the level or the fall of disappointment was just immense for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes here, which I've heard the story, but I've never, been as attentive to understanding it as I am right now. And you pick up your kids, you move the furniture, you put it in the truck, you go through all the stuff, you set up the new house, you go to work, you're fired up, you're on this probably 13 out of 10 level of anticipation compared to anything or everything else in your entire life. And within days, there's a conflict on expectations, which had to feel a bit like the rug cut out. But here's the thing about conflict: he probably felt, the leader of this church that you ended up in this conflict with probably felt very much the same way, and there was this gap in expectation, which leads to conflict. Like,
Sure.
that's just going to happen. He had a very big need. He was making a sacrifice, perhaps from his side, to get you there. You made a sacrifice to come back. There was a collision. Now, trying to stay vague with this and invite everybody to participate in this as well as much as possible. When a conflict like that happens, and especially if there's that much demand, I think you used the word intensity, um, there was probably a chance for the character of Christ to not be best represented. And how much was that a part of making conflict worse than it had to be? Like, standard conflict could be a 2 out of 10 intensity thing, but this was not. This was different for you. What can you do to kind of color in the shades there without going too far into detail?
Well, the leader in question was a very confident person, so you know uh, there there was no doubt in his mind that there was a right and the wrong, and where he landed and where I landed. Number one. Number two, I mentioned the financial turmoil. I think is a perfect word that we were in, and the reason that we were grateful to return was always in the back of my mind, maybe even in the front of my mind. And so when we're having these ugly discussions, I am probably nowhere near my best because I'm worried about money. I'm worried about, uh, I'm sure pride was an enormous piece of it. My
Sure.
pride. I didn't want to disappoint my wife and kids. I didn't want to let down the church that was so instrumental in me finding out truly what a personal relationship with Christ is.
Totally.
Um, there were just all kinds of emotions that if there were two healthy individuals having conflict, I think would not have been present at all. And you notice a lot of that is on me.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, that's what I'm
there's,
loving about this conversation
now,
so far.
I don't mind saying there was a lot of it on the other side, but
Right.
I mean, today I'm happy enough or confident enough to own that I was not the man that God wanted
Yeah.
me to be and entrusted me to be in those moments.
Sure.
I was scared and not strong, and anyway, lots of
Brother,
those.
such a another important thing to pull out here. Anytime that anybody on this call is in a conflict like Rex is describing here, there will always be a moment when you look back and realize your part in it. And and how helpful it would be if we all had the discipline
Yeah.
and the self-awareness and the commitment and the trust in God, the security in God, to ask in real time, how am I contributing to this conflict right now? And if we all were able to do that to some degree, how much better we would represent Jesus in the now instead of looking back, in the future. That's huge for all of us. And I want everybody to also know, I wanted to dig a little bit more, not because I wanted to, make a case against the leader of this church. That's not the point. What we're trying to do is just create a very real understanding of what was going on, because we're getting to the real gist of this podcast, which is what happened to the flow after this. Because the crisis that so many people talk about is they went to church, they got fired up, they got, Rex, to use your terms, in the flow, and then a person in the church hurt them in some way. That phrase, church hurt, and the flow was gone. Jesus didn't do anything. And if we're looking at the math here, there were two people that contributed to the brokenness, not just one. Now let's talk, Rex. Let's go further. Like, what happened to the flow at this point? When I say the flow, that's the subjective internal relationship with God, relationship with others that are close, the practices of going to church, going to small group, reading scripture, journaling, all of the things that you would associate with contributing to the flow. What happened after that relationship was over?
Yeah, a couple editorial comments. One, it's definitely the person, not the institution. So many people at
That's
that
a great
church.
principle. Nice.
They were hurting. I mean, they were hurting badly with us,
Mm.
and the only thing that would help the wounds was Jesus. We just couldn't. None of us could figure that out at the time. There was a lot of people that really worked hard to help Deb and me heal.
Mm.
We just couldn't find it at the time. We were just, it was such a gut punch of unimaginable proportion to us that really we just ran. So we ran. We left the Midwest, went back. Went back. We should have had frequent flyer miles going back and forth. But we went back to the Southeast, and I, I don't think, Brian. I still think we were, maybe we weren't in the center of the river, but I still think we were in the river, if we're going with that analogy.
Perfect.
And we just had another, if my wife were standing here with me, she would be answering with me in lockstep. We just had a couple more things, more than that. We just had a handful of things over the next several years that just continued to chip away. Let me say, we allowed these things to chip away at our fortitude, our faith, and then after several years of being back east, we found ourselves just completely out of flow. That's
Mm,
when the journaling stopped, the praying became more scattered. The communing, let me just say the communing, the talking, the in community with God, those things stopped.
mm.
And then it started to become, well, are we going to church? Yeah, maybe not. I mean, it was just a we and again, I'll own it. We just allowed these things to. I hate the expression "death by a thousand cuts," but we just had sort of had enough, and we just needed a break.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that for most folks, I can't even stand using this phrase, but it's the one that's become popular. Church hurt leaves us vulnerable
Yep,
to those cuts that will threaten intimacy with Jesus, which threatens, if you ask me, everything. If he's the source of life, and if he's the source of receiving love to give love, and receiving forgiveness to give forgiveness, and receiving wisdom to give wisdom, and all those things, then that's risky. So this conversation is just very, very important. And how long was this, would you say, this gap between when things had finally, you would say, would be either on the skirts of the flow or out of the flow before there was any rekindling? What kind of time frame are we talking about there?
I would say 10 solid years
A
in the
decade.
flow.
Oh,
Yeah,
10 in.
in the flow, and then I would say, I mean, maybe a half a dozen years, 5 to 6 years, just completely, definitely out of the flow, but just a haphazard faith. Jesus never left me, and I knew that, and I prayed often, but there was not intentionality. There was not a discipline or a real commitment to my
Hmm.
faith.
I can only imagine what it's like being in a car or in a workout, whatever the people are doing who are listening to this, going, that's exactly where I am, you
Yeah.
know? And if that's the case, we did this for you. I mean, this is for you. And I hope this is meaningful, and I can't wait uh, for how the rest of this conversation might be a strong encouragement to you. Um, Next question, Rex. In what ways during that half a dozen years was Jesus pinging your heart? Like, was he pinging your heart? Did you get any? What's that verse in Revelation? I stand at the door and knock. How many knocks were on the door? And I mean, was that I'll look, but close the door back, ignore the door? What was that? What did that look like?
Well, perhaps providential, we'll use that word again. You know, nature, spiritual pathways, nature, music, um, relationships. There's regular occurrences when I am very confident, very, very confident that God is present in my life. And
Really
so to
quickly,
your
really
say
quickly,
what?
Rex, before we keep going on here, this is the second time you've mentioned spiritual pathways. I know there's a book about the different ways that people naturally commune with God, music, literature, like reading, all these. Do you remember the name of that book? Is it called Spiritual Pathways? Do you remember the author? Maybe if we
I
can.
don't remember. Gosh, shoot.
Well, Google it, spiritual
Sorry.
pathways. I mean, that you've mentioned it enough times. I figured that some curiosity would build up about it. But spiritual pathways, just Google the text, and I think there's a picture of a tree on the front of that cover. I just can't remember who it is, but
Hmm.
didn't want to distract you too much. But I did want to bring that in there. So
Thanks.
obviously, God was working through those pathways for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I ever since the first time I was exposed to the idea of spiritual pathways, it resonated with me
Mm.
because how some people, in fact, I've been a part of some pretty funny prayer exercises, and some people are prayer warriors and can pray for hours on end, and that's inconceivable to me,
Mm. Mm.
to be able
Mm.
to do that. But oh my gosh, just last night, the sunset just just things bubble up in me
Mm.
that I can't
Mm.
explain, a warmth that I experience, um, music, and I'm blessed to have a musical family. But both of my sons love music. It's a huge part of their lives, and it's a lot of fun to have the discussion with family about Jesus being present in non-Christian music.
Mm.
I mean, there's certain chords or certain instruments will just bring a, oh my gosh. And
Mm.
I just believe that that's, to your words, it's a ping
Mm.
from God. He's reminding me who created music. And, Brian, you and I both love to golf. I mean, sometimes if I'm playing okay, sometimes being outside and just in a beautiful setting, it all becomes all about God. It's less about the game and
Mm.
about anything. It's about what just the environment I'm in. So anyway, I think God um, is regularly pinging me and pursuing me,
Mm.
and I'm grateful for that. And Brian, just in raw ugliness, I'm embarrassed that sometimes I run from that pursuit.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. One of the things that was most profoundly influential in my surrender to Jesus as the one who would be in charge of my life. Basically, if Jesus offered me a contract about the rest of my life, he'd put nothing on the paper but ask for a signature anyway. It's like, will you give me your life regardless of what I ask? And one of the things that made me say yes was his relentless pursuit of me in spite of my rejection of him.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, as men, I don't know about how ladies feel about this, but as men, to be rejected by pursuing friendships, relationships, whatnot, if we get rejected, that's like, okay, that's strike three, you're out, we're done here. Because rejection is just it cuts so deep into the male persona. And for Jesus to say, I'll keep chasing you, my
Mm,
security is not bound in your approval or your rejection of me. I am so in love with you that I'm after you no matter what.
mm.
And it sounds like that's what you're describing, that there was that season where it's like, okay, you'll knock, and I delight in the fact that you're knocking, but I'm not ready to get intentional about opening the door, inviting you in to take over again. Does that describe it fairly
Oh,
well?
absolutely. And I
Imagine.
am. Yeah, I know that. I in moments of sanity and clarity, I know that I don't take it for granted that he could absolutely walk away from
Mm.
me. And one of my regular prayers is thank you for choosing to stay with me and stay in front of me and
Mm.
and continue to pursue me in spite of me.
Yeah. So just so everybody has the ability to share the context with Rex and me here, I mentioned we were buddies in eighth grade. We hung out an awful lot, eighth, ninth, 10th ish. And then we had a lot of crossover in our activities through the time I graduated high school. And then we pretty much didn't see each other, but for a couple of chance off situations for 20 something years.
Mhm.
Little bit of pinging, some Van Halen lyrics or something like that via text or
Mhm.
whatnot back and forth, just reminiscent of those 80s years. and keeping up with each other that way. But there wasn't an involvement in each other's lives until Disciples Made was at a place where we knew we would be making some shifts, and we needed our fundraising efforts, our donor participation, to be in place to really support us as we started to take more of a giving posture instead of a subscription client type of posture with the Fully Alive community. And you came into my life. You were sharing with us what you have known from the fundraising world, very helpful. And I sensed a prompting to invite you into my Leaders Made group. So talk about a knock on the door. And Leaders Made's very involved. That's, that was 10 and a half months long. There's a lot of book reading. There was a lot of Bible engagement and journaling. You went from wherever you were to somebody's banging on my door and I'm going to decide whether to let them in or not. So you said yes, and you've said yes since then to being a part of the board here at Disciples Made. What has God done as far as restoring flow in and through that? And what's that been like for you and your family?
Well, I think Leaders Made. Now, maybe it wasn't anywhere near this traumatic, but I I kind of felt like it was a Hail Mary.
Mm.
You know, um, yeah, I'll give this a try. I you know I love Jesus. I just don't love this church thing. I don't love this extra work that I've got to do. I mean, clearly my head was way over
You're a
there.
busy family, very busy family, in the
Yeah,
midst
I
of a
mean,
move and all kinds of stuff.
all kinds of stuff, but in the scheme of things, and I know now, I probably knew it then. In the scheme of things, none of that stuff was as important as pursuing my maker.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I just, it was it. I don't want to say, Brian, it was flippant, but it was like, yeah, I mean, I got to try something.
Mm.
And I mentioned discipline earlier. Discipline is an area of my life, particularly in this area of my life, that I need lots of I need lots of help and work there. And so, this Leaders Made provided a structure.
Mm-hmm.
I have no I sometimes embrace intensity, so that didn't scare me at all. Somebody in our group, our Leaders Made group, described it as a master's intense master's study, and I actually, all those years in higher ed, I appreciated the imagery for me, and it
Mm-hmm.
you know you provided me um, a group of men all over the country that were similar to me. Some, on a continuum. Some were here, some were there, but it was all men in the pursuit of Christ at some level. You provided us, some pretty intensive training, which provided, or excuse me, which required some pretty substantial discipline
Mm-hmm.
and commitment. You know, I remember saying to my wife, and I don't remember if I wasn't feeling good or something, but I just said, I've got to get up early tomorrow morning and do this. And she said, well, maybe you should sleep in. I'm like, no, I made a commitment.
Mm.
I mean, it
Something
was,
to
it was,
that.
what's that?
There's something to that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big factor for
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Because I'm not just letting Brian down, I'm letting these 11 other guys down.
Yeah.
So, and you have structured this very cool ministry that there is some accountability there. So lovingly, and Christ-like, the guys in my small group would say, "Hey, man, you weren't here last week. What was going on?" Or
Mm.
if we didn't get through our assignments, "Hey, guys, what's going on here?
Mm.
We committed to this, and you're letting us down." In a very sweet way, loving way. So I think that structure, that discipline, just the gift, Brian, that you gave me to do this has had a profound impact on me. And
Mm,
you know, I am nowhere near. Let's go back to that term, the flow. I'm nowhere near in the center of the river yet. Um, I know what that feels like. I want that back, and I know that it's not on anybody else's back but Christ and me to get this done. I mean, I can enjoy the impact and influence of a very small handful of men and my wife in my life that are helping me. But at the end of the day, I know it's up to me and my discipline and my pursuit of Christ and His acceptance and pursuit back of me.
mm.
But uh, leaders made, disciples made. I mean, it and my being able to partner with this organization and in my skill set, it's made a huge difference. Huge difference.
Go God. And I know you're continuing on with the triad that you had in our Leaders Made. You guys still get together once a month and harass each other or something like that. You're reading through books together. So that's
Yeah.
kind of an abiding type of practice right now.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, we get together every 2 weeks,
2 weeks. Got it.
and yep, which is a real gift. And we have pursued a handful of books together. Some good, some less good, but it's very challenging. It's very
Mm,
challenging, and this is not a iota against Big C Church. Nothing against Big C Church, but this kind of pursuit feels more Acts 2 to me than
mm.
anything that I've done in a long time, and that's really
Interesting.
what our ministry is about. It's not an in place of church, Big C Church, but it's just a fabulous community that I get to be part of.
All right. Rapid fire question that you are not expecting. So in your,
Okay.
but I can't wait to hear, especially based upon this is kind of the Acts 2 thing I've experienced in your group as a military field officer, an entrepreneur fundraiser, and a local church pastor. Of the three, which is the biggest spiritual leader in the group? The military guy, the pastor, or you?
Is this a three guys walking to a bar?
I'm just curious, like which one plays pastor? Which one is the convener? Which one's the guy pushing everybody forward? Like, I'm just curious. We don't have to use names. There's just the roles.
Yeah, I might be the pusher.
Okay. There you go.
Um, the military field officer acts probably as our spiritual advice. I would say of the three of us, he's the most in the center of the flow
Mm,
at this point. And
interesting.
God love our pastor. He's. I mean, being a pastor is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I decided to press into this question here, I kind of knew, I guessed about 80% of the answer there. For in case any pastors are listening to this, it's like you need friends where you don't have to
Yeah.
be pastor, right?
Amen.
To survive the role of pastor in a local congregation, you need friends where you don't have to play pastor. And that's such a big deal. I'm grateful for him, and I'm grateful for y'all, and the fact that we're in the New Testament, we're called to be a kingdom of pastors. Like we're all pastors to one another, and so for one person to regularly carry that burden for many is just not a great plan. We are running out of time, Rex. As you look back over your life, and we've covered a good bit of it. And thank you so much for being willing to share so vulnerably about how that's impacted you. What 1 to 2 principles do you believe are the most important to remember when anybody in the church, but especially church leaders, let you down?
Hmm. All right, I think I've got three here. One, in the midst of the apex of the pain we were in, I had a good friend say that forgiveness is a daily battle.
Yeah.
And his point was that you you ask for forgiveness, or you ask to have the pain lifted from you. You're asking your maker to do that, and it may take years for you to find the ultimate peace to that. And so the message was very clear to me: ask for
Yeah.
it as long as you need to ask for it. It may take a little while.
Yeah. I want to comment on that real quick. That's so big. A lot of people think if I chose to forgive them, it's over. And
Yeah.
that's the first part. To choose the Jesus plan of forgiveness is the best plan is right. And I remember having prayers with Jesus, and some of the times I was most significantly hurt. Jesus, I know that forgiving that individual is your plan, and I know it's the best plan, and I know it's what's best for me. Right now, I'm so hurt and I'm so angry that I don't want anything to do with that, but I will. So as you give me the grace over time, and you bring this person's name or face back to me, I am going to slowly, as much as I can, and every time you prompt me, I will choose to keep letting this go to the best of my ability until I can think of them without resentment in my soul. Because to not do that is to drink poison while expecting that other person to die. And that's just the best way I've ever heard it. If I'm holding on to a grudge, even though I said I forgive, if I'm still holding that, then that's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Excellent principle. What's next?
All right. Second one is we're human and predisposed to sin. I can't remember what Robert Lewis used to say. We're a collection of colossal foul ups or something like that. I don't know, but
Mm,
we're predisposed to sin. So put more of your faith in Jesus than in humans. I think it would be number two.
so smart.
Number three, and this was I'll leave his name out just because he may be unpopular with some, but a pastor taught me once to pray for those that hurt you,
Mm,
and he even gave us a several step process and the whys of why it's important to pray for those that hurt you. And that's
mm.
if I may say on this wonderful podcast, that sucks. Oh gosh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
It's hard.
hard work. But I think that's one thing that will help. Number one, it'll help forgiveness if you pray for blessings on those people that hurt you. So
That's so true, Rex. Thank you for bringing that up. And thank you for engaging in that prayer. Uh, what's interesting is forgiveness is not opening yourself up to be hurt from that person again. You could still have a wall like, we're not going to engage in life. I'm not going to trust you,
mm,
any of that. It would be a real blessing to move into more of a trusting thing, but that will rarely happen. And it certainly isn't part of the requirement for forgiveness. But what's interesting is I did that discipline praying for somebody that was a major source of hurt about 16, 17 years ago. And I'm actually going to be on a second call with them tomorrow morning about them potentially using and engaging the Fully Alive app. So just even having these conversations, my wife was like, what? It was a major conflict. I would say one of the two most challenging experiences in my life. And God's kind of bringing that back around because of that discipline. So grateful there. Rex, again, thank you, man. I trust
mm.
that you sharing your story will serve many, many people well. I've been on the receiving end of church hurt. Sadly, as you said, we're all just sinful, whatever the mess up kind of people we are. And I've brought hurt on other people, and it saddens me. And I'm just grateful that there's a Jesus who wants to help us out. One of the resources that is in the Fully Alive app, I hope everybody will take the opportunity to engage, is one of our Explore courses called Who Do I Need on the Journey? Because if you have mentors and you have peers and you have apprentices, you've got a 360-degree circle of support around you. One of the things, Rex, that you said is this triad has really helped you to capture back whatever part of that flow there is. Well, what if you had a full circle of protection of people in your life that are protecting you from hurt, walking with you as you hurt, helping you recover as you hurt, and restoring a sense of fullness in that fully alive pursuit of Jesus? I hope everybody takes an opportunity to grab a hold of that. Check that out here very, very soon in the Fully Alive app. Rex, thanks again for hanging with us, man. Any last words before we sign off?
Well, again, Brian, I'm just God knows what He's doing. I'm grateful to be. I'm grateful to be doing life with you and this very cool ministry. It truly is helping me, find the flow again. And I can't express gratitude enough for that. So anyway, thanks.
Live fully alive, buddy. You bet. Thanks for tuning in.